Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our next episode of Football Talk Squadron. Today, we're going to be bringing in the highlights, the keys to the offseason for the teams of the NFC North. Should be a very good episode considering that I'm very close held to the Bears. And by the way, a little introduction. You got Pops here.
And Dutch.
And we're ready to bring in this episode. So get right down to it. We'll go with pick the player. Dutch, you want past or present?
I forget the player. Let's do present first since I went past last time.
All right. So this guy that I'm about to bring up, he is going to be a free agent this year. One of the reasons why I chose to pick him. Talking about Danielle Hunter.
He played for USC, if I remember right.
No,
he didn't. Oh,
no, he did not.
No, that was Griffin that played for USC. That was the defensive end before Hunter. Honestly, this is a good one because I'm sitting back trying to think about where this guy went, and I'm drawing a blank because the last big defensive end that I remember came out around the time that Favre left, which is way before Hunter that I'm thinking about. So this is a good one.
Yeah, so Hunter was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings, so that's another good hint, for the NFC North episode. But I will give you a hint. He came out of the SEC.
SEC. Hunter, if I had to take a shot in the dark, I would say Florida.
No, he just Gold Tigers.
Oh, he was an LSU guy. Wow.
He was an LSU.
No, I did not know that. Well, you got me on that one. You got me on the present. I mean, it's funny that you bring him up. Well, I guess not so funny because we know what we're going to be talking about. He's one of their big free agents this year. I sit back and look at him. It's interesting because I think that he still played well, and I think there's definitely a market for defensive end. There's always a market for defensive end. Let's be honest. Like, as much as corner and wide receiver and all these positions, like, I find that the two that the teams are always trying to find is a quarterback and a defensive end, because if you can find someone that disrupts the quarterback, then you affect the most important position on the other side of the field. Like, and the Super Bowl's happening not this weekend, but next. And that's what I look at for Mahomes. It's like, what's the best way to stop Mahomes? You got to get to him. Like, and if you don't have a guy that's getting to him, if you're giving guys all the time, your team's just struggling. So it'd be interesting to see what Minnesota does. Do they try to retain him? Is he just going to take more money than probably they're willing to pay? That's sort of where I'm seeing Minnesota head with that, because I feel like if they really wanted him, they probably would have thrown that money to him already. But yeah, it's a great one. You got me on that one.
Well, yeah, and
starting off 0 for 1.
Yeah, and the piece about that there is, he was last year got signed to a 1-year, $17 million, and we had this discussion of, is he worth this money? He's been in the league already 8 years. Now it's 9 years, moving into another contract year, and he's not going to get that money if I had to guess, based on the way he played this season. So, yeah. Anyways, I digress until we get into more with the Vikings, but now for the past. All right. So you knew I had to do this to you. Again, this past player only played in the NFC North. In the 2004 draft, he was round 3, pick number 78 by my Chicago Bears out of Fresno State. He played for the Bears and he played for the Vikings.
Fresno State, Bears, and Vikings. I feel like I should know this one, and I'm just sitting back. 2004.
Do you need offense or defense?
Was it defense or offense? Yeah.
He was offense.
Offense. I'm trying to think if there was a wide receiver or running back.
He was a wide receiver
this time. Yeah. the problem is that during this time period, I always feel like this was sort of like the dark days of being a Chicago Bears wide receiver. They would have like one really good guy, but then it was like just sort of like a graveyard for wide receivers during that time, just because. I mean, you had Rex Grossman, you had Kyle Orton, you just had guys that you were just like, dude, can y'all find a quarterback? And it's funny, we're 15 years later from this point, and they're still trying to find a quarterback. I'm going to go over 2. I'm sitting back trying to think of who came out of Fresno State. The receivers that come to mind for Chicago, it's too early for him. Being 2004 is Alshon Jeffrey, but he was South Carolina. And I'm trying to think about who. Brandon Marshall was a UCF guy, I believe. So it wasn't Brandon Marshall, and he played for the
Nope.
Broncos, so that knocks him out. Now you got me on this one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so this guy, another last hint, he ended up being one of Favre's top targets as well when Favre rejoined with the Vikings. If that can re-jog any memories when they made the deep NFC Championship push.
Now I'm thinking it's not Simeon Rice, and I'm trying to remember what the other guy's name was that was their deep threat. I remember he called a bomb from Favre a few times, and I'm just trying to remember what that guy's name was. That was the speed guy that they had.
You're on the right trail.
No, I know because I can see it wasn't Favre. I believe it was Christian Ponder who hit him on like a 99-yard touchdown. I think it was against the Bears on Monday Night Football in the old dome. And I think he also had a fumble in that NFC Championship game against the Saints, if I remember right. But I'm drawing a blank on his name. You have to give me the name.
I'm looking at his stats right now. His longest catch was 99 yards. So, yes, you are on the right guy. It's Bernard Berrien.
Bernard Berrien. Now you got me to 0 for 2. Dude, Bernard Berrien, it's interesting. He sort of has the same, I would say, type of career path of like Roddy Anderson. You take a look at Brandon Cooks. You look at some of those speed guys that they definitely have the ability to take the top off of a defense, and teams love that in a wide receiver. The issue is that I find that most of those guys lack the size that you want to like really get up and get contested 50 for 50 balls. So they really sort of lose their advantage in the red zone. And it's like they're great when you're 99 yards from the end zone and you can just lob it up to this dude and he goes and gets it. But the closer and closer you get to the end zone, you really have to have a guy that runs super crisp routes, is able to, really make contested catches. And that's hard for those speed guys to do. Go ask Kadarius Toney. He can't catch.
Yeah, the way that I
always good to take a shot at old Kadarius.
Yeah, I thought it was good. You brought in talking about Brandon Cooks. I was, kind of alluding. He was always the number 2 guy, in the offenses that he played in. But he did have that speed factor. For the Bears, he did a little bit of returning as well when Hester wasn't. So yeah, he was definitely that deep threat that you had to watch out for. But with that, where do you want to go first?
I mean, with that, you want to start with Minnesota since he played for Minnesota? I think that's probably a good starting point. The NFC North, dude. Before we get into this, I do want to say I've been looking forward to this episode with you just because one, we're gonna just. So I guess if you're a Bears fan listening, you're gonna have to fast forward to the end because we're gonna say the Bears for last because that's gonna be the most buy-in that we get this whole episode. But every one of these teams to me is really interesting because I really do think going into this offseason, they all have the ability to win the division. It's not from a lack of competition. Like I see it as like an over competition. Like this should be a really, really good division. This could easily produce 3 playoff teams next year, provided the health of the quarterback stays the same way. But I think all of these teams, I mean, Green Bay showed it, Detroit showed it in the playoffs this year. And then you have Chicago that, is still fighting through offensive line, just really figuring out their identity as a football team. Fields wasn't healthy for a lot of the years. And then you have Cousins with Minnesota. For me, this is this is a great division going into the offseason to watch. Like, and you know, I I know Detroit, it's the first year that they've been back to the playoffs and they get all the way to the NFC title game. I just look at it from the standpoint this is an up and coming division. They all want to win the Super Bowl is their goal. It's not, the Titans where it's like, hey, we're just trying to make the playoffs and see what happens. Like it is Super Bowl or bust for these teams. That is the definition by which these teams are held to, which is nice. But start off with Minnesota, a team that ultimately the biggest question in my mind is they lose Kirk Cousins, which I'll just throw it back to you. Do you sign Kirk Cousins after the injury, or do you look in other ways?
So I'm a big Kirk Cousins fan. I do like that. I think he has it. There's a lot of games that you're like, man, he's their guy. He's the guy that they need. Now here's how I'll lead this. If this was Kirk, um, coming off a fresh year, and we got to see him play all the way through, I know he was playing the same way he played last season when he had a fantastic season. It just seemed like, before he got hurt with the Achilles, like it didn't seem like the calls or the plays were falling the right way that they were for him last year when they started off real hot. Um, but the rumor is that he wants 90 million for 2 years. So he wants 45 million a year for these final 2 years. Now, that could be all rumors, that could be all hearsay. But a guy at his stature, I could see some fidelity behind him wanting that kind of money. And honestly, I don't think he's worth that money this late in his year. I think he's 36. So he'll be 38 coming off that contract. I know that he still looks healthy. He still looks good, but we just don't know, how that Achilles is going to hold up. And then just also, if O'Connor's ready to go in a different direction at the helm of quarterback, I could easily see Kirk Cousins not getting a contract to stay with him.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that rumor yet. That when you threw out 45 million, it didn't sound that far fetched because I know that they're saying that Baker Mayfield could get in the $40 million range this year, which almost fell out of my chair when I heard that because I was just like, in what universe? Like, not say I think Baker played really well, but it's one of those ones where you're just like, I guess it's just a new market for quarterbacks. This 40 million is sort of the benchmark for me. Cousins, I know that we went into this off season or into the season. I know me and Maul were talking about it. They won so many games last year with one score, and it's so hard to redo that. And they
Mm-hmm.
were coming up short on those. But Kirk Cousins' stats, like, dude,
Fantastic.
yeah, Cousins was playing out of his mind. And also remember, Cousins beat the Niners. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the Niners are going to the Super Bowl this weekend. A lot of people, me included, I remember when San Francisco went up there, they're like, well, primetime Kirk Cousins are going to show up. Niners are going to get back on track. And Cousins looked awesome. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it's one of these ones. The big thing with Minnesota is so they're sitting number 15 overall in the cap. They've got $28 million left, to play with. They're number 11 in the draft, so I think that they're going to be out of range unless they trade up to go get somebody. Do I think that they can trade up to number 1 with Chicago? No, because I think Chicago fans would lose their mind if they had to play Caleb Williams twice a year. No matter how well the Bears do, I don't think that a division rival is going to move up like that to the number 1 seed with you. The issue is who do you go get? Like, if you're gonna tell Kirk Cousins no, then you also have to sit back and go, well, who are we gonna play? And I think that's the big thing of why I say they're probably gonna pay him to come back. Is you look at the
Mm-hmm.
NFL last year with the backup situations, it's like there's just not a good answer in terms of who you're gonna go get. Um, I'd pay Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. I could definitely see that because, you definitely, if you had to look between Kirk Cousins and Russell, you're not going to be Russell Wilson ends when you go pay Kirk. So I do see that, and just like you said, they're not in a position to move that far up in the draft, and it'll be interesting to see just based on everybody that they seem to be losing, because all the backup quarterbacks are gone too. So I'm curious to see. I don't think that they're able to move into their backup quarterbacks yet. I don't think. Shoot, who's their backup? Kellen Mund? Was it Mund? Well, I mean, I know they got Mullins, but Mullins is a free agent after this
Well, they
year.
had Josh Dobbs too, and they ended up benching him. They put in
Hmm.
Mullins. They had Kellen Munn. I think they cut Munn because Munn wasn't doing so hot. Which honestly, I could have told you that him coming out of Texas A&M, he had some games where he sort of threw the ball well, and he had some other games where man, they really looked, you know, uh, poor in college. He was a stretch to begin with. There's not outside of Kirk Cousins, there's really not a market for the quarterback position, which is probably why he's asking 45 mil. You sit back, you look at the Falcons, you look at some other teams that really need a quarterback, and he's going to own the market. He'd have to take a hometown discount to keep him. The other piece to that equation is that if you pay him 45 million over 2 years, you're going to cut into your ability to pay Justin Jefferson,
Exactly.
which is a huge piece for them. And I don't know how Minnesota is going to handle that. The only other, we talked about Kirk Cousins being the free agent, Hunter's the free agent that we talked about and guess the player, and the only other player is Cam Akers. And the only reason I bring him up is he was playing pretty well before he got hurt. I think they're going to let him ride just because running back is such um, a low commodity in terms of keeping a player around and paying him more. I think it's a high commodity to go find someone in the draft and a free agent. So yeah, I sit back and I think they keep him just because the market's sort of terrible for that. Where do you sort of look at outside of the position of quarterback for you? What's the things that Minnesota needs to improve this offseason?
Yeah, I'm looking now. They've got three linemen that are free agents, and that's the biggest piece for Kirk Cousin to succeed is if he's able to be back there. Dalton Reisner, he's a uh, pretty good guard, Pro Bowler. I think he's going to have to get some money if they want to try to keep him. So that's going to be a question mark that they're scratching. They go find other guys. Obviously, they can draft as well. So the line's going to need some help. That was one hole that I saw. And a little bit on the defensive side, too. The defensive line, they were missing some edge guys. So I could expect they'll probably go for an edge guy and try to beef up their line a little bit to, if they dump this money into Kirk, they're going to need somebody to protect him for the next 2 years so it doesn't end up like Aaron Rodgers on the first year of the new contract.
For sure. And I mean, losing Hunter, you want an edge. I think, you know, since the running back has declined, the number one position taken in the draft historically has always been corner. They're sitting at 11. They could easily, I think, in my mind, grab, especially if they're there. They're in a good position to grab the number one corner in the draft, just depending how the rest shakes out. You look at the position of wide receiver for them, they're set on that. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, they're great. Tight end and Hawkinson, there's no issues there. I look at
Hmm.
running back, not in the first round, but I definitely think in the second round, you're going to have Blank Corum. You're going to have some other guys sitting there that I think that it, we went into this season that them giving up Dalvin Cook. And you're like, okay, they really believe in Madison, which I think they did. But it just didn't work out. He had some problems holding on to
Hmm.
football, which I get. It's one of those things we always see that we'll see a backup come in and shine, and then when he gets that starting role, he doesn't live up to what the team really needs. So I think it's something that they're going to focus on. I don't see them spending the number 11 pick. There's not that Bijan Robinson that you're going to really risk or put a lot of stake into with a first round pick. But yeah, from the position that you talked about, offensive lineman, there's only a few out. Every year there's only really about two tackles, maybe three, only one or two centers that you'd most time the center doesn't even make it in the first round. They go in the second. It's difficult, but yeah, if you're gonna have pay Cousins all that money, you're going to have to be able to invest in him to stand upright at the end of the day.
For sure.
And then you take a look. I think the other thing you sort of bring up is that defense. You look at the rest of the division, even the Bears, like they'll be better next year offensively. Green Bay's looking good. Detroit looked amazing going into the playoffs up until the second half when they turned into the Falcons. They're going to have the ability in this division to put up points, which is sort of non-standard for the NFC North. It's always sort of been a defensive division for most of the teams. That's how they've sort of relied on winning games, not putting up 30 to 45 points. So, yeah, I sit back and look at Minnesota and I'd go, yeah, they need to invest in the defensive side of the football as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this offseason brings to us. I know we haven't gotten to that yet. There's a lot of speculation. I think the NFC North is definitely going to be the most interesting because obviously the Bears hold the number one pick in the draft and all the hype that they're getting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But as far as I got, that's all I've got for Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I guess going right from Minnesota, I would say their arch rival in the division is Green Bay. So I'll just hop right into Green Bay. They lose Darnell Savage, safety, free agent, AJ Dillon, running back, who I really think Matt LaFleur really liked. He dealt with a lot more injuries this year. I think they could probably keep him for pretty cheap. He hasn't proven that, hey, I'm a starter in the NFL by any means. Outside of him, just some, they lose a couple of linemen and not starters, or really high profile guys. Those are the two bigger pieces I saw. I know Jareer Alexander, the guy that had the whole coin flip thing, he's up as well. So they have some defensive side of the ball. For me, the question I asked, and I'll ask it to you, are they going to give Love some love in the draft? Because historically, under Aaron Rodgers, they never got a skill position player for him. And that, for me, is this whole team is we know that he showed against Dallas and he showed late in the year that, hey, he's capable of being a good quarterback. He made some tremendous throws, some tremendous plays, and it's great. He's playing with these guys and he's making them look good. And I always just sit back and I go, can you imagine if you had put some pieces around him that talent wise were head and shoulders above the guys he got? Do you think that Green Bay sort of breaks that cycle in the first round at pick number 25, or did they go back to the defense again?
I would say just by looking at it, if I had to put on my GM hat right now, I'm probably looking at the defense. You had Dobbs, you had Watson. Those guys were pretty strong 1 and 2 on the offense, and I would try to run it back, with LaFleur and say, hey man, like is this what you want to run with? Because if so, we need to help up this secondary. I mean, they're losing 5 safeties to free agency this year, so they're going to need some help in the secondary. So why not use one of those later first round picks on getting your guy, to play the deep ball? Did I lose you?
Yeah, I mean, from the safety position, I sit back and the thing about safety is in this league now, it's changed so much because of the inability to really contact the receiver. You sort of look at drafts in the past where you were able to go sort of find that headhunter, and now you're really trying to find a guy that can cover, which is just difficult because most of the time, let's be honest, like the reason the kid's back there at safety in college is because he really doesn't have that one-on-one ability to cover. And it's rare. The days of finding that Troy Polamalu, the Charles Woodson, now Charles started off as a corner and then moved on, which is sort of the typical route for an NFL player at corner. Is once he loses some of that speed, he'll go back and play safety, where it's like, I don't have to man on man this guy. I can really shadow and use my skills that I learned at the position of corner to play, which is where I would go if I was Green Bay. Like, you can always take a seasoned veteran and put him back there to allow him to make some plays. I don't, I, the Packers are sitting. The problem with the Packers is I know they want to pay Love. They're number 23 overall on the cap, which you're like, oh, that's not bad. And then I tell you, well, they only have $350,000. Like,
Exactly.
it's just they have some big decisions to make coming up, and it's tough. I get that in the championship game, their defense gave up some points to San Francisco, but I also look at the championship game and go, you're one bad love pass away and a kicker from either A, having the game tied up before they even make that drive, and an interception away on first down where you go, hey, next year, how's he going to look? The other position for Green Bay that I find they just have not had, since Favre, really, is tight end. Like, I look at Green Bay and I'm like, man, can you imagine if somehow they were able to trade up and go get Brock Bowers? Like, what that would do for that offense? Like, that for me is where I sort of form my whole thing around Jordan Love getting some help. Is if you were to put a player in that position that opens up that offense even more, like, how much more devastating is that offense going to be? That for me is the key. Like, you look at the rest of the teams in the division, what's their biggest weakness? Pass defense. Like, it's sort of a, it really, when you take a look at the two teams in the Super Bowl with the Chiefs and the 49ers, what did they do best, especially in the second half of games? It was their pass defense. They shut teams down with the ability to cover man on man and blitz. I get that that's a good position to do, but I also sit back and look at Green Bay. They're number 25 in the draft. You're sort of teetering on that edge of, I think gems are found at the end of the first round, but they're also not you're sort of taking a wild card bet on a first round pick where it's like, you can always go steal like maybe a tight end. The Lions did last year with Sam Laporta in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
So there's guys out there to be had. I just sort of sit back and I look for Green Bay. It's like I would appreciate it if they went after and got a wide receiver or a tight end for Jordan Love to have a little bit more offensive success. And at the same time, Aaron Jones is getting a little bit older. I mean, he still looked great last year. He ran the ball tremendous, but in the NFL, I wouldn't be surprised if they go get a running back in the second or third round to eventually fill that gap if they don't bring A.J. Dillon back. But from that standpoint, with the Packers, do you think that it's still the defensive side? Just with the secondary, what's your thoughts on their linebacker play and sort of also just defensive line? I know Rashad Gary had a better year, but the Packers have sort of failed up front as well on the defensive line to really sort of make an impact. And there's not that guy for the Packers that I can even name on the defensive line outside of Gary.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I know that they're young. That's the one part is that I think they're the youngest team in the whole NFL. So they do have age on their side, to continue to build into a system. We also got to remember Joe Brady just got fired. So, or not Joe Brady. I'm sorry. Was it Joe? No, Barry. Yeah, I think their DC's name was Barry. He just got fired. So they're bringing in somebody new, bringing in a brand new system. So it's hard to say, what it's going to look like, under a new DC running the show. I think having the young guys in the building is going to be an advantage for a new DC coming in. So uh, honestly, I kind of liked your take. I was when you're talking about the tight ends, I was going through my head, and the only two that I could think of, the first one that popped up was Bubba Franks, being the Green Bay tight end, and then the next
Bubba
one was
was amazing.
yeah, and then the next one was Donald Lee. Those were the two that really kind of stuck out in my head that I remembered growing up watching. Because then after that, it was kind of a smattering. You had a old Jimmy Graham, you had an old Jared Cook. Some of those guys
The
coming
only young
through.
guy they ever took The only young guy they ever took was, I'm not sure if you remember him. He had a neck injury, and that's what took him out. Jermichael Finley came
Mm-hmm.
out of Texas. I mean, he was a really good player. He showed some promise those first few years, but had a neck injury. It took him out of the game. It's, one of those classic, we'll never know what he would have mattered, but it was clear that with him on the roster, it made that entire team better, which I think that you see it from the teams that are, look at the two teams in the Super Bowl. You got Kelsey, you got Kittle. When you go back to the AFC Championship, who was on the other side of the teams that were in. You had Mark Andrews and you had Sam Laporta. Like when you have a tight end that has a major impact in the game, dude, it makes a huge difference. Like, and it's because they're a mismatch problem. Like whoever, and that to me, like I am super, super high on Brock Bowers, mainly because every single team in the SEC knew what they were playing against. They were playing against Brock Bowers. And that dude continuously made plays. Like, I think he proved him. I get it's not the NFL. I'm not trying to say the SEC is the NFL. I'm just saying
It's
that
pretty
from a,
close.
I'm just saying from a perspective of college coaches knew I can't let this guy win. And still in games, he found a way to have an impact. Like, whoever gets him, hats off. Like,
Yeah.
we up until the Super Bowl, we're not going to discuss it. With the AFC West, my prediction is who gets them is the Chargers. Like, I sit back and you put Herbert with Bowers, I think good things happen. That's my prediction with that. For the draft, once we get to the draft episode, I'm going to stick to my guns on that unless the order significantly changes. But that for me is the big piece in there. Now, jumping ship from teams, unless you got anything else to add to Green Bay. You got anything else?
I mean, they can plummet for all that they want.
Typical Bears fan hating on the Packers. You know, it sucks when they lose a quarterback and you still get owned by the new one.
Easy.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Too soon. Is you talked about the coordinators changing out. The coordinators that didn't change out, surprisingly, was Detroit. So, you know,
Wild.
our last episode was the NFC East. We predicted Ben Johnson. Everything was sort of written in stone, and now a lot of things are coming out that he didn't like the organization. He wanted to stay put, stayed with the Lions, which is, I think, huge for the Lions to keep that, you know, that same type of just continuity in the building. He knows what he has in playmakers. He knows what their capabilities are, limitations. Detroit, which what's surprising to me, they're only losing two, you know, starters right now, which is CJ Gardner Johnson. And he showed that in the second half he couldn't play. And then Josh Reynolds, who showed he couldn't catch football when it really mattered. You know, and then I the Josh Reynolds thing really made me mad because after the game they were like, "What happened?" He was like, "You know, it just happens sometimes." You know, it wasn't like this. I didn't get the sense from him that he was like heartbroken over it, like where it was just like, "Dude, I cost myself the chance to go to a Super Bowl and possibly win this game." I didn't get that. The good news for the Lions, they're actually number 7. They have $61 million in the cap space. So I think the Lions are going to be playmakers in free agent. They're going to go find someone. Like, in the reason for that is I appreciate what Campbell or yeah, what Dan Campbell said at the end, which was, you know, it's this may be our only shot. And I think he really said that because I think as a player, you understand that, like, yo, this is hard to get to. It's hard to get to the NFC Championship. It's hard to get back. You know, the last time the Lions were in the NFC Championship was in 1994, I believe. You know, almost 30 years to the day for them to get back to that game. I sit back and I look at the Lions. I think they've done extraordinarily well in the draft. Like when you think about that, Aiden Hutchinson has proven he should have been the number one player. Everyone picked on him for taking Jameer Gibbs. Everyone picked on for taking the other Campbell at linebacker. They get Sam Laporta and Branch in the second round, all 4 starters. The Lions have been what's killed their franchise for so long is not drafting right. Now they're drafting right. For me, I sit back and look at the secondary. That was sort of the thing that really hurt them. You know, Sutton couldn't guard anyone man to man. CJ was a liability at safety. Do you think that defense is really the prime position to go fix this offseason? And if not, where do you think that they go?
Yeah, they've also got a starter on the line that they got to go pay in Glasgow. You know, I look at it. It's kind of the same thing with Kirk Cousins. Same with Jared Goff. You know, he's not a scrambler per se. Like he'll run when he has to, but most of the time he drops back. So uh, they got a lineman that they got to go get. But I agree, the secondary of Detroit needs to be fixed. I think that had a lot to do with the 49ers coming back on them, and we saw CJ GJ. Um, he was getting cooked. Sutton, as we've mentioned before. I forgot who had the ball bounce off their face. It should have been an interception, but Ayuk caught it, and it's first and goal. You, like you gotta have guys back there. And I'm not saying they're not good, but that should have been an interception, and we're talking a whole new ball game with the Detroit Lions probably going to the Super Bowl, just from that one play alone. Being a momentum kill versus becoming a touchdown for the 49ers. Um, so yeah, I would say secondary is their biggest issue right now that I see, and then also they're losing a few defensive linemen. I know all we think about is Aiden Hutchinson, but you got to get guys who can also supplement him. And with the amount of money that they have to spend, you can get a second tier guy who's still going to get that pressure. Uh, you know, and he might get all the glory because they're double, triple teaming Hutchinson. So bring in a guy a little bit cheaper, fix your secondary, and they've already got a good team because they got everybody. They've got everybody that they want on offense, and just like you talked about, man, that draft class, getting ranked a C plus by Mel Kiper or whatever, like it's an A plus, dude. Like every single one of those guys were starters. Jameer and Laporta are Pro Bowlers. It's just unreal.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said. This is my philosophy as, if you put me in the position of being a GM of a football team, it's you got to fix the trenches. The trenches control the game. I remember Ray Lewis talked about it once, and I thought it was great that he came out and said this. They were like, "What makes it so that you have really good years?" And he said there is one position on the field that makes it so a middle linebacker has a tremendous season, and it's nose tackle. He's like, when
Mhm.
you have a guy up front that takes two guys to block, he goes, then no one's blocking me. I'm able to run free. He's like, when Tony Siragusa was hogging up that middle, he
Mhm.
was unstoppable because it was like guys just they couldn't get to the second level because it was like those guys up front were wreaking havoc. And for me and the Lions, like I'm in that boat too, where you sit back and you're like, hey, at number 29, if there's a corner available that you tout it really highly, yeah. But defensive tackles do tend to fall. And you sort of sit back and it's like, dude, there's so many when you think about just all of college football, all the guys playing defensive tackle, there's a ton. You have the ability to get a guy that especially on a rookie deal that you can continually sub in and out. You don't have to play him every down. And someone that is able to at least when, like you talked about, when Aiden is getting double teamed, it's like, dude, this dude's on a one-on-one matchup. Like that's what I'm begging for those type of plays. Like, and what I'm
Mhm.
begging even more for him is just to, please double team him so you leave Aiden one-on-one. It's like those are the type of things that you need. The only other thing for Detroit is this is one of the things I would like to see them go do in the offseason is go find a really good number two. Like I think they have Sam Laporta, they got Amon Ra, but finding another receiver in that offense would be huge, in my opinion. Now, you can sit back and you can say, well, they could go get like a real popular name's going to be Mike Evans
Mhm.
this offseason, which I sit back and I go, man, like that'd be huge for them to give them that type of 50-50 ball because that's what they really don't have right now. Like Amon Ra is a great all route runner. He's good underneath, good over the top, really consistent with him catching the football. But in terms of like, hey, you get down in the red zone and I want to throw that, that fade corner over to the pylon, like they don't have that guy. And that for me is
Mhm.
something that Detroit could fix. The issue is sitting at 29. I think most of your wide receivers are gone by that point. Who knows who falls? Detroit, like you said, is graded pretty well. Is there any free agents that sort of stick out in your mind? Or, if you want to go with Mike Evans, go for it. That Detroit could go sign that makes them better.
Yeah. So, uh, I'm looking at it right now. Somebody that I'm kind of thinking about who's going to be um, up this season hasn't been around because he's been injured this year and kind of got overshadowed by Chris Olave. Mike Thomas. He's a guy who hasn't had production just because of injuries and negative perceptions on who he is. Still think Mike. I still think you can't guard him. I think he's still got some years left on his legs. And he was that guy for Drew Brees. I think he could fit in up there and be that guy for them. Whether or not that happens or not, I highly doubt it. But I like Mike Thomas, in my opinion.
The only reason why it won't happen is he doesn't have the attitude that Campbell wants.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah,
that's the biggest. Like if he came up there and was hungry, and Campbell got the sense that that dude would be willing to die to get on the field, and nothing was, they'd have to hold him back from playing. Then I think Campbell would take him in a heartbeat. That's sort of the big thing that I see with Detroit. Detroit wants that attitude guy. They want that guy that wants to be on the field. That they have to fight to get him off. Um, that for me, we'll see. I love the problem with Mike Thomas is, and maybe this is like the fantasy side of me coming out. Like every time I take him, I'm like, dude, this guy's got so much talent. I know what he is. And then every year he just takes a huge dump on my roster and I just leave him on the bench the whole year. It's like, God, you didn't do nothing. Or in what's even worse is he'll have like a game where he comes out and like catches like over 100 yards and two
yeah, lights out.
touchdowns. So you're like, he's back. Yeah.
Yep,
And then he's gone forever.
yep.
So it's week 3, toe injury, gone for the year. But that's it for me with Detroit. You got anything else for Detroit before we jump to your Dub Bears?
Man, I tell you what, if they fix that secondary, I would watch out for the Detroit Lions. Like we talked about it a little bit in a previous episode. The fact that they are bringing back both of their coordinators and they're getting that continuity moving into next season, I mean that speaks volumes. You're not bringing in somebody new and having all this change. Um, they're keeping their roster for the most part. I mean, that's dangerous, man. And as long as the film doesn't, give away all the hints and tendencies, and they're able to switch up schemes a little bit, Detroit's still going to be that team next year, coming out of the NFC North. And as we get ready to move into the Bears, I mean that scares me. I will say, we were up. We were winning both games against Detroit last season. We won one, and then they came back in the fourth quarter and one of them. So the Bears have dogs in the fight. As we get ready to go into it, I'll let you go ahead and lead this one off.
Okay. So we'll talk about the free agents. One of them, I'll throw his name out real quick. He dropped a beautiful pass by Fields and Robert Tanyan. I know they have Cole Kmet, but I do like Tanyan just from having another tight end. Cole can't play every down. I get that. They also lose Darnell Mooney, who is sort of this receiver, in my opinion, that I think there was every year there was a lot of hype over, like, hey, this is finally this guy's breakout year. Never happened. I don't see them bringing him back. Then you have two guys that are sort of on opposite end. One's young, one's old, and I think both played really, really well this year. Is you got Jalen Johnson at cornerback, and then you have Dante Freeman at running back. And Freeman really played well
Yeah, he
down the
did.
stretch, which was really surprising to me. Um, I the Bears are sitting number 8. They got 49 million. They were sitting up number 1. They got Montez Sweat, and let me tell you that trade.
Worked
I
out.
think everyone sort of I'll be honest, like foul on me. I was sort of sitting back going, dude, y'all sort of overpaid when you could have gotten Chase Young for cheaper. And Chase Young doesn't look like he has it right now, but Montez Sweat is just wrecking shop up in Chicago. So I sit back and I go, bravo, Bears. You made a great call on that one. You paid the man, and he's still playing hard for you. I would like to see him re-sign Jalen Johnson. I think that corner's a hard position to find consistency out of. What are your opinions with those free agents I mentioned, and your thoughts on keeping them around or moving on somewhere else?
Yeah, I tell you what, when the Bears picked up Robert Tunyon, off of Green Bay. I was stoked. I was like, man, this would be a perfect number two, right behind Cole Kmet. Like, I was like, it's not interchangeable because Cole Kmet I do think has a better skill set than Tunyon does. But I mean, you swap them out or you bring in two tight end sets, and both of them are going to catch a ball. So I was pumped about that. If we can get him for cheap, it would be great to keep him around. I will say this is my Roquan Smith moment of the offseason. We have to bring back Jalen. You have to bring back JJ. Put him back out there on the island and give the man the money. Last year, we got Stevenson in the draft. We got Brisker. Those guys were playing lights out in that secondary. You can't start over. And it sucks to say, but Jalen has proven himself. He's shown that he's worth the money. There was negative press that came out about him. Everything cleared the air. He came out and was like, look, I didn't say none of this. He's like, I want to be in Chicago. So I think the Bears, Poles has to pay this guy. That's just my personal opinion. I go back to when we had the Fuller brother, Kyle. When we had Kyle Fuller, we didn't pay him. We let him walk. And I was just like, what are we doing? We ended up getting Jalen Johnson out of that and out of that next draft. And it's like, you got to bring this kid back. Like, don't do the same thing you did with Fuller, because Fuller was a Pro Bowler. Guess what? Johnson is too. He's an all-pro. Like, you can't let that kid walk. So that's where I stand on that. As far as Foreman, man, so yes, he did play strong down the back half of the season, looking a little bit of his old Atlanta Falcons self, a little bit there rushing the ball. I will say the thing for me was I was thinking about this was I've already mentioned I hated that we let go of Montgomery in the offseason. I'm glad he had a great year, but Khalil Herbert showed he's not that guy, that Montgomery used to be. And we need a pound for pound back. And if we're able to bring Foreman back on a cheap deal, that'd be great. But honestly, and we can talk into it, the Bears have all this money in the cap space. This is where we go get our guy. This is where,
Please say
man,
it.
yeah,
Please
perfect
say
world. Yeah, perfect world.
Say
I
it.
want Saquon.
Say it.
Yeah.
Yes, Saquon. Yes.
Give me Saquon in a Bears jersey. That blue and orange 26 going to look great. Man, that I don't want to get my hopes up. Him or give me.
We're in the exact same boat on Saquon.
Yeah.
Go for it.
You can
No,
give me.
you finish out.
Yeah, I want an orange and blue 22 if that doesn't work out with Henry on the back. Like, I will take that pound for pound dude. Like, give me King Henry if I can't get Saquon. Like, this is where we got to make our punch. Go ahead.
No. I personally disagree with you on the Henry. I would rather take Jacobs, and here's why. Before Henry, Josh Jacobs with the Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Henry's versatility when it comes to the zone read. Like he really doesn't have that cut that Saquon and Josh Jacobs have, and I love both of those. I think Henry matches up well to me for the Cowboys offense. Like downhill, running in between the tackles. That is Henry's style, and that's where he's best at. The Bears, they want a guy that has lateral quickness, that's able to make cuts, go against the grain, have good cutbacks, reverse field, and the ability to catch the football, both of which Saquon and Josh Jacobs have. I mean, I would love Saquon on this team. Absolutely love Saquon. And I know we've talked all this, and we really haven't even talked about the biggest thing, which is I think all of this is going to be determined with what they do with the number one pick. So you're a Bears fan, and not just Bears fan, you're a diehard Bears fan. So here and now, you're sitting there, you're Josh Tate, you got the number one draft pick, you're sitting there in the draft boardroom. It's your decision to make. Where are you going with the number one pick? Are you taking someone, or are you trying to trade back?
Yeah, if I'm in the room, I am on the phone with Washington or New England saying, "What do you guys have? What's your best offer that you can give to me right now for this number one pick? Because you guys need a quarterback. I don't." And that's where my foot would be drawn in the sand. I don't need a quarterback. I'm sorry. We can have these discussions maybe in a draft episode or something like that. But Fields is our guy. You're going to tear up the locker room. I'm telling you that right now. Mark this tape. We draft Caleb Williams. That locker room is torn apart. You just lost your captain. I think that speaks a lot from a leadership perspective. Caleb Williams is a young kid, hasn't really had much exposure. Obviously, hasn't had the exposure to the big leagues where Fields been in it for 3 years in the trenches fighting for the Bears. Loves Chicago. Chicago loves him. Man, you're talking about tearing up a franchise on this decision, and that's the thing that sucks. Like I don't feel. I don't want to be Ryan Poles. I don't want to be Kevin Warren. Like I don't want to be in those conversations because you're it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you stick with Fields and he doesn't pan out, then maybe you lost 2 to 3 years. You go with Caleb Williams, it doesn't pan out, like you're just resetting the quarterback cycle that we always do with the Bears. And it's a tough decision that has to be made, and unfortunately with the volatility of the league, it can be their jobs, based on this decision. But if I'm GM, I'm calling Washington, I'm calling New England, I'm trading back, and I'm taking MHJ to help out DJ Moore.
I can't argue that if they go number 2 or 3. I said this to you in the text, and I really do believe it, and I think we're going to see a lot of it. I think the league right now, just based upon this is sort of conspiracy theory, but I think you guys will see where I'm going with this. And it's not conspiracy theory because it's happened before. It's happened with Dan Marino. It's happened with Bo Jackson. It's happened with plenty of guys that a lot of dirt starts to come out on who they think is the number one overall guy. And it's meant not to, pick on the kids so much. I think teams that are dropping these type of like diva comments and stuff, some of it may be true, but I think that they're dropping them because they're trying to make it so Chicago's pick isn't worth as much as it truly is. Like they want Caleb Williams, they want to trade up, but they don't want to pay what Chicago wants. And like, because two teams that I sit back and I think really want, Caleb Williams is Denver and the Raiders. Like, especially Denver. Denver would love to move up and take him. The issue is, their draft pick it's not this right there. You're going to get the number one wide receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. You could go out and get the number one tackle or get the number one corner or add Brock Bowers. Like you're falling a little bit more farther in the draft, which for the Bears, I sit back and I go, this is the exact same thing that you had with the Panthers last year. And for me, I always like proven talent over a question mark talent, which every draft pick is. Like, I don't care what. Go look. Just what you brought up about Mel Kiper C+ for the Lions is living proof. There are so many times that Mel Kiper is like, this is the guy. He's going to be a game wrecker. He's going to be a game changer, and he gets in the league and he's gone in 3 years. Like I sit back and I look at Denver. It's like, hey, if you want him, we'll take a first round pick and we'll take Patrick Surtain. Like we'll pay him. We know he's a great corner, and it immediately shores up our corner if we lose Jalen Johnson. I look at the Raiders and I'm like, hey, we'll take someone off your roster. We'll take Devontae Adams. We'll take someone else that maybe other guys don't want for us to help out our defense or our offense. Like that to me is I know I've gone back and forth. I'm with you on this one. Build a roster.
Exactly.
Don't continually chase like they have year after year for quarterback. And I go back to Jay Cutler years. It's like, hey, when you put guys around him, how did he look? He looked really good. You went out and got Brandon Marshall for him. Like, I think people forget the Bears played Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game. where
Mm-hmm.
Aaron took him to the Super Bowl. The Bears were there. They had the ability. And I know going back even to the double doink year, the Bears had a good team. Yes, it was with a new quarterback. I sit back and I look at the same thing. When you have a rookie quarterback, I'm not saying pay Fields right now. You still got him for
Two
another year on a
years.
rookie deal. Yeah,
You got
dude,
the fifth
take
year. Yeah.
take an advantage of this and build a roster because next year you can always, if you want to sell your soul to go up and move up and draft a guy, you can. And
Exactly.
like Caleb Williams isn't the first guy that's going to come out. Look at last year. CJ Stroud's sitting there. Bryce Young. Every year, there's always some guy that every NFL franchise is sort of salivating over. And yet again, we sit back and we go, hey, Patrick Mahomes didn't go till number 10. Now, I think that when you have a good coaching staff and you put really good players around Mahomes, it really helped him out that rookie year. Or it wasn't his rookie year, it was just his first year as a starter. I look at that with Fields. Like, for me, get that man some offensive linemen because we sort of, I think you mentioned this either in text or on the podcast. And if not, I'll let you talk to it. Of all the times you saw Fields scramble, how many of those do you think CW gets away from?
None. Like in all honesty, like
Yeah.
I you watch tape, and Fields has the elusiveness. C- Everybody compares him to Lamar. I would give Lamar a little bit higher grade for running the ball, but Justin is a very good runner. But he can also throw. I would argue Justin probably throws better than Lamar. That's also because I'm partial, and I watched what he did in a AFC Championship game and just blew it. So I would take Justin in that regard. But not to digress, man. Honestly, I think it all comes back to it's like the Baker Mayfield situation. Justin has had two different head coaches. He's had two, three OCs. It's been constantly changing around him. He's never been able to get settled into a system. He just picked up his newest OC for this upcoming season, and it's not Kingsbury. So that said a lot to me. That I think the Bears might see that Justin is their guy, and I hope it comes true. I really do. I think we kind of talked about it off script. The Bears are going to keep their cards tight, which sucks as a fan because you're like, come on, guys, just say who you're going to commit to. That way, they would get this all over with. But it keeps the other 31 teams in the league guessing about what the Bears are going to do with that number one pick. So I can see both sides of the hat of why they won't come out and tell us what's going to happen with that. But at the end of the day, yeah, Justin, I would take him. Proven experience. Even if we want to talk about college, man, like Justin was in the CFPs, like he was playing for it. He had that bad loss to
Yeah.
Georgia there when the clock struck midnight, but CW hasn't had those moments. And when he did, he lost to those top teams. He was never able to overcome.
I think I sit back and what I'll go back to is I'll go back to Dak Prescott's freshman year in the NFL. You know, looks tremendous. And the next year, everyone's like, oh, he had a major regression. And I was like, I remember that his second year, Tyron Smith, his starting left tackle, is out of the game. They're playing the Falcons, and the Falcons sacked him like 7 times. And I think one of the guys had like 4 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, Dak played terrible. And I'm like, who wouldn't? Like, this is a byproduct of when your offensive line is injured and you're playing with guys who are getting beat. This is what happens. And for me, like, I look at the Bears, and that's the thing right now. It's like he's running for his life. I sit back and I look, they have the number 1 and the number 9 draft pick. If they're able to ship off that number 1 and at least stay in the top 5 and get another either player or draft pick either this year in the second or especially like 2 first round picks, do it. Because I'm in your boat. Like if you fall back to number 2, yeah, the choice is easy. You take Marvin Harrison Jr. And then at number 9, you shore up your defense or your offense. You either take a corner or you take
Mhm.
an offensive lineman. I'd prefer offensive lineman. And then you move on. And you have the money to go get Saquon. Like, I sit back and I go, hey, if I got Fields and he developed that rapport with DJ Moore, the best thing I can do is get him some other talent. The other guy that, I mean,
Mhm.
if he somehow slipped down the number 9, I sit back and I go, put Cole Kmet and Brock Bowers on the same field and see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
that for me, that's what I would love. The other side to the ball defensively that Chicago needs to address is the position for me of safety. Like, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
I'm an Alabama fan. I love Eddie Jackson.
He's getting
Eddie
old.
Jackson has been getting burned a lot here lately.
Mhm.
He is not the defensive turnover magnet that he was early on in his career with the Bears, where it just seemed like every other series Eddie Jackson was getting an interception. Like, more times than not, I turn on the TV to watch him getting burned. The position of safety is a big one for the Bears, and that's also something that you can go address in free agency or with a trade in the draft. Like, I think teams have players that the Bears desperately need, and for me, Chicago is sitting there as they should. They're sort of the bottom dweller in terms of just positional ranking of the NFC North. If you want to make a comeback and you want to see what Fields really has since you got him 2 years left, you got to be willing to go out and spend this money and make some things happen. And I'm with you. Like, go get Saquon, go get guys that at the end of the day, Fields has no choice whether to either prove it or, we'll find someone else. We're not going to pay you next year. We'll pay for a veteran or we'll trade somebody. Um, I know what I told you, which is true. I believe it was March 13th is the date. That's when NFL free agency opens again post this season and the new season begins. It, the dead giveaway, they're going to trade. If they're going to take Caleb Williams, then they're going to trade Fields before the draft ever happens.
Mhm.
Like, because the second you take Caleb Williams off the board, teams are not going to pay you what they would have for Justin Fields. You're most likely going to be in a position where you have to cut him, um, just because he's on his rookie deal and you can't get but like a fifth or sixth rounder for him. They may be able to do that, but it's just so much harder. So I think that for the Bears, we're going to know a lot more of a clear picture way before we get to the draft. Those deals are going to be made. If they go into the draft with Justin Fields, then if I'm in Vegas, I'm putting a mortgage on the fact that they're not taking Caleb Williams with the number 1 pick. But I mean, outside of the position of safety, what's some positions on I know we talked a lot about the offense. On the defensive side of the football, where would you like to see them make some improvements?
Yeah, man, I tell you what, I'm interested to see what this new DC out of Buffalo is going to do for us. Um, he played for the Bears, so he kind of understands the mentality of having that defense that's top of the league. And man, Eberflus got us there. You look at, we fired the DC last year for whatever the personal reasons that was going on. Eberflus was calling such a fantastic defense the last part of the season. You look at the numbers, they were second behind Cleveland Browns in total defense. So the Bears have a good defense. We have a young defense. If I had to say that I wanted one position besides to help out Eddie Jackson, because Eddie Jackson's still getting 14 million next year. So he's still going to be stuck back there just for the sake of money. Uh, I need somebody. I need that havocer right in the middle that we used to have with Akeem Hicks. If I could get a guy like you brought up Siragusa, if I can get a guy in the middle that's going to cause a double team every single play, that's what the Bears need. If we can find, just a cheap guy laying around that wants to come play for the Bears. Like, give them 10 million, on a 1 year deal, and fill that gap right up the middle. That's what I would like to see. Sweat was definitely that dude this year. We just let go of one of our others. We brought him in this year on a 1 year deal from the Colts. Yannick, I forget his last name, but he was a defensive end. So we need a little help on the D line. That's somewhere else that I would like to see the Bears try to go and fix on the defensive side.
Yeah, there's not a guy that I sit back. At least I know that some of the drafts have pointed to Dallas Turner, the defensive end from Alabama.
Mm,
This is where I am with Alabama guys, especially on the defensive line. Like I told you that if they were to trade with Washington, my number one choice of player would be Jonathan Allen. Like
mm,
he is a man amongst boys. I think, he also plays with just an immense passion. I watched him at Bama for a long time. He would be the guy that I go target. I don't like Dallas Turner at number 9, and the reason is when you watch him throughout the college football season, more times than not, and I sort of felt this way about Will Anderson for a lot of times. I know that Will went to a Pro Bowl this year and he's made good plays. It just seemed that in the biggest of moments, I think about the big time against Michigan, against, the year prior against LSU. And when he had Will Anderson on the opposite side of him, there was just more times than not that it was like, dude, this guy just didn't make the plays that you were expecting him to make. And for me, that's where the Bears can sort of get in trouble is they over evaluate a guy and they go, oh, we're sitting at number 9. This is the number 1 defensive end according to Mel Kiper. Let's take him. And that's where they get in trouble. I look at the Lions have sort of proven this like thing that they've been doing the past few years, which is, trust your instincts, get a really good scouting report, and take the guy that you think is worth that pick, not the guy that
mm,
we're going to get hounded for. Because I think what you pointed to is a huge piece of the draft is that GMs look at it and they're like, yo, this is risky because if I take this guy sooner than other people think, all the fans here and and let me tell you, it gets back to the owner is they took him too high. They took this, that was a terrible pick. That's all they hear. And when it doesn't work out in your favor, it's what gets you canned. And it's a lot of these people have no idea what it's like. Mel Kiper doesn't know what it's like to be a GM. If Mel Kiper was so good at picking draft picks, you know what he would be? He'd be in the front office of a team making draft picks. He wouldn't be on ESPN for
exactly.
30 years.
Yep.
Like, I don't, like, why is that not the question? Like, how is this guy supposed to tell me what talent is when he's not been in that position to make those picks?
Hmm. Yeah, and the piece that I add on to that too, um, I look back. My initial reaction. Let's go back to the 2018 draft. I'm sitting there. Sorry, 2017. Uh, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, man, the Bears are about to take Deshaun Watson. We go up, we trade up, number 2 pick, from 49ers, and I'm like, man, we're about to go get Deshaun. And then, because at the time, I'll be honest, I knew who Mahomes was, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought kind of, I hate to say it now, but similar to a Johnny Manziel, just flies around the field and is able to make those off script plays. But I was like, man, Deshaun played for Clemson, played for the Natty, got one. I was like, this is our guy. And then I hear Mitchell Trubisky, North Carolina, and I'm just like, who is Mitchell Trubisky? And like that's the thing that you're alluding to. Like as a GM, you make that pick. You live and die by that. Like we want all the Bears fans wanted Pace's head. Ryan Pace, the former GM before Poles, we wanted his head the moment that Trubisky started sucking, because you look at the stats of Deshaun and Mahomes, what they did, they came from the same draft class, they were still available, and this is what we got, and you can see how our franchise went downhill, just from that one draft alone.
Yeah. It is so tough. Like I know we sit back and even we, on a podcast will pick on guys for draft picks, but the reason I keep going back to this whole Detroit thing, like the reason Detroit went to their, you know, first NFC championship this quarter of a season and other teams have not, like Dallas and the Commanders, is because they drafted the right guys. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you miss in a draft, dude, it sets you back a whole year, like in really years, because you can't. the Bears are sort of notorious, and especially the Jets. The Jets are more notorious than the Bears are for it. Where when you are just resetting the position of quarterback every 4 years, you get into exactly what you talked about at this cycle that you are chasing something that by the time you finally figured out those pieces, I mean, I sort of sit back and look at it with Trubisky. It's like they had a defense. They had guys like they had Khalil Mack, they had Roquan, they had all these pieces that you were just sort of sitting there. You're like, dude, this is our time. You know, you only have about I would say a 3 year window to maybe a 5 year window at best to
Mhm.
really, keep all these guys intact. Unless you're the Chiefs and you just sort of figure it out because you have the best quarterback in the league, that's really the only difference. And I get that teams are chasing after that position. You're able to win if you're able to just solidify your roster. Like get guys in the right position that make everyone better. I think a prime example of this is the 49ers. Like they play Kansas City in the championship, and you look at who they replace guys with, it's like, yeah, they had Raheem Mostert. Who they go get? They went and got Christian McCaffrey. Oh, they
Mhm.
had, you know, Kendrick Bourne at wide receiver. Who they go get? Brandon Ayuk. They go get Juwan Jennings. Like they kept Debo, they kept Kittle, they kept guys that made sense, but there was always rooms for improvement. And now they're back in the Super Bowl. And it's like that's how teams do it is they're able to go out and make those things. I look at Chicago and what they did with Montez Sweat. Like the reason that the defense looked better in the second half of the season because they got Montez Sweat. Like
100%.
the Bears shacked it. Like you made the right call on that. And so for me, like that, I have faith right now in the management of Chicago. But this season, I think is what you sort of have alluded to. It's a do or die season for them. Like they their organization will be shaped about what they do in this draft. Plain and
Mhm.
simple.
Yeah, and
Because
the last little plug that I was going to make is, go back into last season, even with Fields hurt for the couple of games that he was, we were a 7-10 team. Okay, but we were also up on the 49ers. We were up on the or not 49ers. We were up on the Vikings, we were up on the Lions, and we were up on the Cleveland Browns. Had we finished out those games, by not getting conservative on the offensive play calling after halftime, we're in the playoffs. We would have bumped Green Bay from being in the playoffs. And I just look at that and just think Chicago's there. They're missing those last couple of pieces to the puzzle, and they're a playoff team. And maybe moving into the offseason.
yeah, and I'll sort of wrap up my piece and I'll let you tag on to this. This is I've been thinking about this a lot. You know, I think I would be calling for the why am I keep going back on should they take Caleb, should they not take Caleb? Caleb has has I think the best arm in the draft. Caleb can make all these throws. And I asked myself the question the other day, and I was like, I'm going to bring this up on the podcast. What do I not like about Caleb? The things I don't like about Caleb, which this is sort of the danger territory, is the mindset. Like, who is this guy mentally? Is this the guy that when I'm 3-13, the guy that's still going to go out there and try to sling it and be a leader? Is this the guy that's going to rally the locker room? Is this the guy that when I draft, he's going to be like Peyton and be like, I'm flying to India and give me the playbook. I'm going to start studying, or is he going to go party? Is he going to be a Manziel? Is he going to be a Russell, or is he going to be a CJ Stroud? Like, who am I getting? And when I honestly ask that question, I sort of sit back and I go, man, if I had to give a lean, it's not to the good side. Like I don't have a lot of faith just based upon some of the things that he's done in college. And this isn't about him crying with his mom. It's not that at all. It's more just like you see the way he carries himself and how he interacts with his teammates and just sort of who he is. I just go, the painting of the nails. And I get that, it's a game, it's competitive. He's trying to do stuff. And I also just sort of sit back and I go, you know, you're asking for it in the NFL. Like guys, they see that it's bulletin board. You don't see other quarterbacks do that. Why? Because it's like, dude, I want my offensive lineman getting murdered this game because they're trying to kill me for what I painted on my nails.
Mm-hmm.
I sit back and I look at that and I go, that's enough of a warning flag to me that it's not the surefire number one pick. Like if it wasn't for that type of stuff, if he was, for me, the surefire pick that I always go back to was Andrew Luck. Like Andrew Luck to me was like that bona fide guy that it was like, dude, this is a great kid. He's got a great arm. He does everything that you could possibly want from a franchise quarterback. This is the guy I want to build my team around. Unfortunately for him, injuries caught up and he retired too soon. But I'd rather go with Fields. Like I'd rather go with someone that has honestly been through the muck with the Bears and has stuck with them, and he wants to be the quarterback. You don't hear him calling for a trade or I want out. That's just where I'm at. I keep going back to that with Caleb Williams and just what the Bears should do. About you've been able to sit back and watch it way more and think about this. What are your thoughts on that as we sort of wrap it up?
Yeah, man. I kind of look at it. There was, and it's all rumor, it's all hearsay. Unless you see somebody on TV or in an interview putting it on record. You know, there was the bowl game that they just played this past season. Miller Morse, I think is his name. Whatever the backup quarterback, I think it's Morse Miller. It's double M. I do know that. Um, he had a fantastic game, and it was noted that one of the players like, yeah, it's good to be a team again. And I was like, if they're alluding that to Caleb Williams, that is not the guy that I want leading my franchise. And I kind of talked about it already. I'm very open that I do not want Caleb Williams, and the reason being, it has nothing to do with Caleb's off the field issues. With what kind of headspace he's going to bring to the team, but it's um, all the time invested that Justin Fields already has with that organization. Um, the talent's there, the skills there. He's the captain of the team. Like he already is leading that locker room, and those guys are ready to go to battle. I mean, DJ Moore, he put it on ESPN. He said, "I told them I want Justin as my quarterback." Like it got published out on Get Up. They were talking about it from the exit interviews. Like these guys want Justin to be their quarterback, and you would think that as a normal human being, in a managerial position, you'd be like, all right, this is who they want. Like I have to listen to my troops. I have to listen to my guys. Otherwise, they're not going to play for this kid. And the last little piece that I'll hit on is his record against winning teams in college. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't beat those teams, that poses a problem for me. And that's a problem that I see that Caleb Williams has is what if he gets on a terrible Bears team? I don't see him being a leader that Justin Fields has been coming out of the trenches of losing records to almost breaking 500 this past season.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of like the Lions. You want to see the Bears do well. I don't. It's for me. It's great because I just sort of sit back. I love the NFL now. I don't have a particular diehard team in the NFL, so it's almost like every team I'm pulling for, unless they're the Dallas Cowboys. Then I hope they just eat it every single year, or even better, they douse their fans' hopes in the wild card round against Packers. There's nothing more beautiful than watching Dak get picked off, being down 21-7. That was, a highlight of my year to start it off. But with the Bears, like I sit back and I think this is such a key opportunity for them to really make a statement to get guys in a good position, pick up some free agents, make good decisions in the draft, especially if they trade back the number one pick, either stock up on players or draft picks or both, and really build a Bears team for the future. Because when you do this type of stuff and you're able to move back and get stuff, you have what no other team in your division has, which is leverage. Like, and you
Mhm.
hold that for the next few years, and then drafts where you're able to sit back and you're like, dude, we got picks. Like, we're gonna go get more guys. Like, we're gonna fill the holes on our team because we're able to go out and pick up dudes. It's a great time, in my opinion, to be a Bears fan. Like, the future looks bright if they make the right decisions. But I know that's long winded on the Bears. We sort of knew that going in this episode. I appreciate, I loved it. We'll see how they do. And dude, I look forward to it. I know you were talking about before the episode, and I'll let everybody know at home. We're going to sort of more wait for our predictions of what happens this season occur after the draft, sort of let free agency do its thing. The draft, what happens, we'll do we'll do a preview of the draft, we'll do a review of the draft, and then we'll, just like we did last season, we'll get into the predictions of what we have. And I look forward to seeing what Pop says about his faithful Bears, of where does he think, based upon all of the things that are going to happen this offseason, where are they going in the division? Are they going to win it? Is it going to be the first time since Super Bowl 20 that you see the Bears since 1985 coming back, 40 years later, almost to the Super Bowl to win? Not just, I know they played Peyton and them, but to get another Super Bowl victory for that town, and especially for Pops, I know he would cherish that forever. So outside of that, you got anything else before we wrap it up?
Yeah, that'd be the one Super Bowl that you don't have to wait 10 years to pay for. We're just going to swipe a card, baby. We're going.
I'll let you explain that one to your wife, so she murders you. But thank you guys for tuning in. As always, please follow, subscribe on our TikTok and Instagram pages, as well as our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. It really helps out our podcast. Well, it helps us know that we're doing the right things. If you guys have something that you want to hear, we haven't heard anything from you guys in a while, please reach out, let us know. We'll be sure to, tackle your questions. We'll take them head on. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. I think we've proven so far, we're running this podcast, that if we say something that turns out to be wrong, we're not like ESPN and act like it never occurred. We'll step up and own it. So I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. Pops, thanks for joining us. You've been a pleasure working with for these past few episodes. Look forward to this continuing throughout the off season.
As always.
All right. Well, time to pull chalks. We'll see you next time.